During this video, we're gonna see how is this amazing idea of the hoax of the moon landing. If it's true or is a really big lie, I can tell you right now, it's completely true. But I can tell you also why we think that it's not true, why there's so many people thinking that we never went to the moon, but not even close. Some of them, they believe that only the Apollo 11 was a hoax and the other one was real ones. We also gonna see a few stuff around the how this amazing achievement that we have in the humanity that going to the moon, 20th July of 1969 was impulsed by several years of investigation, researching and whatever, and we're gonna see how this amazing story begins. As always, we're gonna start for the beginning.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other thing, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too.
Everything started with the first 3 missions. No. Everything started between Russia and United States. They have a really big fight around which kind of stuff we're gonna throw into the air. Yes, the big problem around the spatial idea, going to the moon, going to Mars, going to Jupiter, it started with a war, with the old-fashioned Cold War. Because the main problem was throwing stuff into the space and also throwing nuclear devices into the space. That's where everything started. The first really big release and achievements were made by Russia and was obviously everybody knows about this one, Sputnik 1, Sputnik. They were some kind of reflectors. They weren't a really big machines, but they were able to throw something into the space and orbiting a little bit. They were able to put one animal into the orbit. I'm talking about Laika. I need to make a video about Laika. Laika was a disaster of cruelty, and they also were able to put a human into the space, and I'm talking about Yuri Gagarin. In this space career between United States and Russia, United States America were losing by far. The main idea was reaching into the moon. Russia and USA, they were fighting each other to reach into the moon. Russia was a little bit delayed on that stuff, but America, they have something a little bit more consist idea of a program. They have 3 different programs. Mercury, that was the idea of floating around the space, throwing stuff into the space. The second program, Gemini, the idea was to dock in space, moving the ships, docking, making funny stuff, flying around, funny space stuff into the air. The main idea is how we can move in the space. At that time, United States, they already making some kind of improvement around the idea of moving around the space. There were a bunch of myths how we can live in space. If the zero gravity will be bad for your health, actually yes, it's true, but you need to stay several months and you're going to have bones problems, cholesterol. I don't know why cholesterol is always there. That was answered by the Russia experiment of Yuri Gagarin, of course. We have Mercury fooling around in the air. Gemini is docking and moving the spaceships into the space. Apollo was the 3rd mission. Every program, it has several missions. For example, we already know Apollo 11. Apollo 11 was the 11th mission, because it makes sense, isn't it? It's 11 mission. Everybody knows about the 13 Apollo 13. They made a movie with Tom Hanks and Sydney Sweeney, I guess. A mission that was a disaster. For example, Apollo 10, they were able to orbit the moon, watching the moon this way and saying, oh my god, I want to be in the moon. It has something that I didn't tell you. They never repeat the same astronauts. If you go one time, that's it. You will never be called to another mission. Why? There is no why. We have this kind of a spectrum of Russia trying to reach the moon and USA also trying to reach to the moon. Actually, one of the ideas of experiments or whatever was throwing a nuclear device in the moon. That's the most American way. Throw a nuclear device into the moon, saying to the world, be careful. If we can throw a nuclear device into the moon, be careful. One guy say, you know what? The idea of the nuclear device is, I don't like it. Maybe there are some aliens over there and they won't like it. The idea of being attacked by the most horrible weapon that we have on Earth. If you want to go to a test or a presentation with your professor or teacher, you need to know the number 3. Everything is around the number 3. I don't know why, just a coincidence. 3 days to go to the moon, 300,000 kilometers between Earth and moon, and 3 astronauts. Louis Armstrong, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. What a name, Michael Collins. Neil Armstrong was the commander. You're commanding just 2 guys? Yes, I'm the commander of 2 guys, but we're going to the moon. What are you doing right now? You're watching Stranger Things, isn't it? And 2 other that were the pilots, Paul Aldrin and Michael Collins. This is the part where the myth started to appear. In that time, everybody believed that happening of the history of the war was happening. But after a few years, 1976, Bill Casey, that was a provider of the NASA, released a book known as We Never Went to the Moon. Oh, that's something quite obvious. It was 1976. You need to understand the context of the USA in that time. We're talking about the Watergate scandal. You need to understand how the people were living after the paranoid idea of presidents lying to you, conspirations. We have a video about this one. Bill Casey was able to release this book, and we have people really skeptical about the idea of having this kind of stuff, so they were a little bit paranoid. And they started to create this funny idea of we never went to the moon, because in some pictures they appear something shady, something that it doesn't make any sense. They went to the moon with a different kind of cameras, able to work on vacuum. Actually, they didn't have any vision place, or a place that you need to put your eyes to see how the picture is going to take it. You need to put it right here and shoot. Everything could be shot. Any picture could be appearing. There are several web pages that you can see. One is a little bit nice and beautiful, and the other one is the database. You can see on the description these 2 web pages. One is the web page of the 90s. It's horrible. Most of the footage that you're watching right now are from that database. I think it's the most complete of all, but in the other cases, in this whole context that we're talking, they started to be a little bit skeptical until today. Other people that we already talked on this channel was the flat earthers, that also they believe that we never went to the moon because they need that, the whole idea that the moon doesn't exist. There were a bunch of conspiracy all together coming into the idea that was a complete hoax. There is evidence that we went to the moon. This mirror was placed on the mission 11, 14 and 15. The idea of that mirror is that we can measure the distance between the moon and the earth. Actually, you can do it if you have the really nice equipment. You don't need to pay anything, because also they don't know if you're using it. It's just a mirror. The first mission was a little bit random because they throw the first spaceship known as the Eagle. They land in the place they were able to land, and in the meantime, one guy was waiting in the orbit of the moon, waiting to the other guys to finish all the work that they needed to. There were several missions. In some of them, they were driving a car. I don't know why. Yes, it makes sense. The car was electric, and it was a really big car after all. It was able to move around 36 kilometers, but you need to understand the idea of you can be walking on the moon, because you know what? It's dangerous. Nobody told you that, isn't it? Moving with a car will be much more easy. They were playing golf. In that time, you can understand that they are trolling. This is trolling. Was a way to show you the physics of the moon. But it was completely obvious if you throw something, well, whatever. The idea is to show that it was completely physical with something that doesn't have the same gravity of the Earth. There is a little bit more evidence about that we went to the moon. The rocks, and everybody say, well, you can grab any rock on the Earth and say, you know, this rock is from the moon because it's white. It's different because it has a different composition. It has a lunar composition. Actually, this kind of dust is impossible to make it on Earth. They started to find that it has some kind of industrial benefits or whatever, and they were able to replicate the same moon rocks from the moon right here on Earth. And that's Why? Some people say, well, they were able to replicate it. Why? Because it's created right here in the USA or Russia. After that winning position of the USA compared to the Russia stuff, the Russians decided not to go further in the idea of going to the moon and say, well, you know what? I don't care. I don't care the moon. I'm going to space. And they released the Mir station, for example. They started to make a really big research around how is living on the space, which kind of problems, the isolations, not having any internet. Most of the research that the Russians made was used on the technology that we have today on the international station, so it was a little bit of benefit. Actually, the international station, different to the Mir, it has some shared technology and there is no secret, supposedly. I don't know. Maybe they have some secrets. In one time, they were able to dock two different ships. The Apollo-Soyuz mission worked together with the Russian people in 1975. Actually, when they come together, they have different pieces that they dock together. One built in Russia and the other one built in America. The idea of these two stuff is to put it together. I think they have to. Actually, some of the Russians astronauts, they were able to smuggle some vodka. I love Russia. And the Americans were able to drink a little bit of vodka. Not completely bottled, but something. We need to go back to the moon. There were several myths around the Saturn rocket. They say that the building of the Saturn was secret. Also that it has a chance of 33% of chances to blow up randomly and they don't know why. And actually the astronauts, they didn't know that. All the sketches of the Saturn V were destroyed. This stuff was completely not true. For example, the sketches, they weren't destroyed, they were loose or it was completely on paper. They were machines. The computer that we have in that time, they were just made for making calculation. There weren't any databases or storage. They were like really big calculators. The idea of the 33% of chances to the Saturn to blow up, it wasn't true. It was a risky mission, yes. The Saturn, it has this maybe experimental machine that the astronauts knew that, and it wasn't secret, because if it's secret, why you're using to being photographed and sending guys to the moon? Yes, it wasn't secret. Also, there's another myth that the Saturn V was actually designed to storage nuclear devices to throw it into the Russia place or whatever. Intercontinental warhead. That was absolutely a non-true. Why? Because if you need to go to another continent to bomb with nuclear devices, you need a really big fast rocket. And the Saturn V was really slow. Actually, the whole design of the Saturn V, the idea was to sending people to the moon. That was the complete design. If you're thinking about throwing missiles, it's a different design if you need to send people to the moon. I don't know. You need a little bit of storage or whatever. We're gonna talk about the elephant on the room. Yes. That lamp is off. Ladies and gentlemen, please like, subscribe, comment, and tell me what you think. We went to the moon or not? And do all the things that YouTubers like to do and find it out.